Hello, welcome back to Chat About It, Don't Chat About It with me, Rachel, aka the Queen of the Woke, as crowned by one of my haters, because you can't get more woke than me, right? Aha. Now, listen, J.K. Rowling has once again caused a bit of a stir, apparently. Now, I'm not going to offer too much of an opinion on this. I think you may or may not know where I stand on this. You will if you've been a long time subscriber to my channel. But she's come under fire. Now, I came across this tweet the other day. Now, I'm not saying that this person was the first person to tweet this. Okay. This was just the first tweet that I came across. Now, when I read it, I thought about it and I was like, no, I'm not necessarily going to get too involved in that one. But then something else happened and I was like, right, I need to have a proper look at this. So I came across a tweet from one India Willoughby. Now, she tweeted this: J.K. Rowling is one of the biggest raisers of trans hate in the UK. Sorry, I'll read that again. J.K. Rowling is one of the biggest funders of trans hate in the UK. Here she is bunging 70k loose change to an all I think like an all run from a bedroom, an organization run from a bedroom, that she's trying to get trans women stripped of legal recognition. And then in quotes, show me the one thing JKR has done that's transphobic. Number 3755. Now, India provided a picture, and it's just a picture. No link to the fundraiser. And no, if you go down, there was no link to the any actual article or anything like that. Now, I have checked India's profile since, and she has since tweeted an article based on this. Now, the issue that I have, and this is not something that's just India. This happens a lot. What people do is they take something, they may cut some information out and present it as fact, or they may just say something as fact but not actually give you any sources, which is why I always try, and I always try and link my sources wherever I can for you so that you can actually go look and make your own informed decision. And because people don't do that, that means then you can no longer make an informed decision. You should be able to decide for yourself. And you should be able to sit there, read, and question everything that is going on with no ungiven bias of perhaps what other people have told you. You need to draw that conclusion for yourself. Now, obviously, like I said, it's not just it's not just India. And I'm not saying that India does it all the time, because she actually tweets out quite a lot of articles and things like that. And she mentioned something earlier that was based on fact. So, and I knew to be true. Now, let's have a look at some of these replies. So, of course, people asking, is this a Scottish one? India says yes. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. The hysterical part is J.K. Rowling, has had a ton of gender affirming care. What does that mean? Are you referring to her past, where she had perhaps some abusive relations? I don't know. What are you referring to? What does that mean? Think of what good that could have been done with that money instead of being ploughed into a fabulous pit of gender critical hate. And then it's got a few other tweets, all pretty much the same thing. Now, the comments were turned off from this. However, the effect that has then is, of course, and I'm sure a lot of Twitter users, ex-users know this, is that then they rely on the view quotes. And we got things like Joe can go straight to hell. Imagine having infinite money and this is what you do with it. This is why it's important to not support anything Harry Potter. That money is directly funding campaigns to eradicate transgender people. Now, I want to be clear here. Okay, is it really eradicating transgender people, or is it specifically because of what we're going to get into, the term woman? Because after all, people always ask, what is a woman? But they never ask, what is a man? It is direct support for the elimination of a marginalized group. Every time you buy anything Harry Potter related, you're contributing to this. You can't be a trans ally while adding to the person's personal wealth. There's literally no excuses anymore. No one cares if you loved HP as a kid. You're now directly funding transphobic hate organisations. For Women Scotland, now that's the organiser. Organisers of this campaign to repeal the GRA is a hate group pretending to be for women, but doesn't like anybody pointing out that most women disagree with their goals. Well, here's the thing, Scott. Nice to know that you speak for women. Here's the thing. When I actually read this out to you, let's see who agrees and who doesn't. So, yeah, he says also that J.K. Rowling backs transphobic groups who align with her own bigotry. Okay. And originally, like I said, I didn't pay that much attention to it until other people were commenting on other posts saying that J.K. Rowling did this. J.K. Rowling posted, pledged 70K to X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, right, okay, prove it. Receipts. Because all we've got to go on is a photograph. And this photograph, if I go back, just has crowdjustice.com. That's all it has. And no one was providing anything. And I was like, no, I need to make my own decision. I need to be able to decide for myself if this is what people say it is. And eventually, someone actually provided me with an article. Now, it wasn't a link to the fundraiser, unfortunately, probably because they couldn't find it. But don't worry, I found it. Scottish Daily Express. Proud J.K. Rowling donates 70K to legal battle to stop the SNP government changing the definition of a woman. Doesn't sound particularly bad to me, but from now on, I'm just going to read you the stuff, and I'd like you to question it, think about it, and make your own informed decision. Doesn't matter what I think. You need to decide for yourselves, and I'm giving you that opportunity to do that. The author is backing for Women Scotland after their application for a judicial review to the Supreme Court was given the go-ahead as the campaigners take on the Scottish government. Now, author J.K. Rowling has donated 70K to a feminist group taking their challenge over a legal definition of woman in Scotland to the UK's highest court. The Harry Potter author, an outspoken supporter of women's rights amid the culture clash with trans rights, pledged 70K for the FWS Fighting Fund after their application for a judicial review decision to the Supreme Court was granted on Friday. Ms. Rowling said, "You know how proud I am to know you. Thank you for all your hard work and perseverance. This is truly a historic case." Please do excuse me, my voice is going weird today. And the crowdfunder to raise a fighting fund went live on Friday and is already standing at £101,900 from 807 pledges. Their appeal states, "We are raising to pay the necessary legal fees to proceed with the case in the UK Supreme Court with the initial target for the first month of 75K. This is a crucial case for us all. Protection for those with the protected characteristic of gender reassignment will remain unchanged in the Equality Act, regardless of whether they have a GRC, gender recognition certificate. But for a woman to have full rights and protection, it is important that sex is clarified as referring to biology. Your help is invaluable, and we appreciate all your efforts in fundraising and spreading the word. The news provoked an angry backlash from trans activists, with Tom Harlow of Cabaret Against the Hate Crime posting a rallying call on X and branding FWS, a TERF organization, trans exclusionary radical feminist. He shouted out to Stonewall UK, LGBTYS, oh gosh, THTORG UK. Sorry, I didn't mean that in a bad way. It was just long. Scottish Trans, TIE campaign, Switchboard LGBT, Mermaids Gender, and Pride UK org. Harlow posted, "Are you aware this TERF organisation in Scotland, along with 70k donation from J.K. Rowling, are trying to change equality law? How can we stop this from even being debated in court?" If they've won the right to debate, then they have the right to debate it in court, just to be clear. How can we make sure trans rights are protected and not up for constant legal threats by TERFs with too much money and time on their hands? FWS took the Scottish Government to court in 2021 to challenge its definition of women in the Gender Representation on Public Boards Scotland Act. The legislation aims to ensure that non-executive members on public boards are at least 50% women, which was defined as those living as women or those who intended to or had already gone through the the process of legal gender recognition. Under the Equality Act, there are separate definitions for women and transgender women, with FWS challenging the Scottish Government on those grounds. FWS said, "We have previously taken two separate judicial reviews on the definition of women in the Gender Representation on Public Boards Scotland Act 2018 and the accompanying statutory guidance, winning the first and losing the second. This legislation relies on definitions set out in the Equality Act, and the judicial reviews have served to show that a definition of sex that is inclusive of a person's acquired gender on a gender recognition certificate leaves the Equality Act opaque and unworkable for many women. There needs to be a clarity that sex is a biological term, and while the UK government recognises this, it is yet to take any remedial action in response to the second judicial review ruling. We have strong grounds to appeal the decision by the Court of Session, and have been granted permission for the case to be heard by the UK Supreme Court." Now, of course, this will be linked for you so you can go and read it for yourself. By the way, if you want some like detailed sort of information and some detailed opinions on this particular subject matter, I did actually post it to my Discord server, chat about it with everyone. So you can always check that out if you would like to. Okay, so this is what they are referring to. Is this it? UK Supreme Court, the definition of sex in the Equality Act. This is what it is. 26 days to go. They got 136,108, and it's pledged of 200,000 to reach the target. So here we go. If I've got this correct, this is the correct one. Double check. Yes, I've got the correct one. So this is the summary For this particular fundraiser, UK Supreme Court, the definition of sex in the Equality Act. This is what people have failed to provide for people to make their own informed decisions. I'm not offering any opinion on this particular part. This is up for you to decide. Okay? So, summary. We have previously taken 2 separate judicial reviews on the definition of women in the Gender Representation on Public Boards Scotland Act 2018 and the accompanying statutory guidance, winning the first and losing the second. This legislation relies on definitions set out in the Equality Act 2010, and the judicial reviews have served to show that the definition of sex that is inclusive of a person's acquired gender on a gender recognition certificate leaves the Equality Act opaque and unworkable for many women. There needs to be clarity that sex is a biological term. And while the UK government recognises this, it is yet to make any remedial action in response to the second judicial review ruling. We have a strong grounds to appeal the decision by the Court of Session and have been granted permission for the case to be heard by the UK Supreme Court. Don't forget, this will be linked below. The Inner House of the Court of Session judgment. We believe the Equality Act was drafted on the basis of the ordinary common law understanding of the biological differences between the two sexes. The protected characteristic sex in the Equality Act is defined as a reference to a man or a woman, where man means a male of any age and a woman means a female of any age. We think it is quite clear that these are distinct and separate groups and that women is not a mixed sex category. However, in our recent judicial review for Scotland for Women Scotland versus the Scottish Minister 2023 CSIH 37, the Inner House took the opposite view and decided there is a relationship between the Gender Recognition Act 2004 GRA and the Equality Act 2010, and held that the meaning of the sex in the Equality Act incorporated the GRA framework. The court decision stated that the person with a gender recognition certificate in their acquired gender has the protected characteristic of gender reassignment. Separately, they also possess the protected characteristics of sex according to the term of their GRC and have a presumptive right to access single-sex services of their acquired gender. Okay. On the other hand, individuals without a GRC, whether they have the protected characteristic of gender reassignment or not, retain the sex in which they were born and have no right to access services provided for members of the opposite sex. Interesting wording. The court concluded that a biologically male person with a GRC in a female gender comes with the definition of woman for the purpose of the Equality Act, and therefore the revised statutory guidance issued in respect of the Gender Representation on Public Boards Scotland Act 2018 is lawful. The statutory guidance gives the following definition: the meaning of woman for the purpose of the Act. There is no definition of woman set out in the Act with effect from 19th of April 2022, following the decision of the Court of 18 February and March 22nd, 2022. God, that was wordy. Therefore, women in the Act has the meaning under Section 11 and Section 212 of the Equality Act 2010. In addition, in terms of Section 19 of the Gender Recognition Act 2004, where a full gender recognition certificate has been issued to a person that their acquired gender is female, this person's sex is that of a woman, and where a full gender recognition certificate has been issued to a person that their acquired gender is male, this person's sex becomes that of a man. We think the court came to the wrong conclusion, not least because it should have been bound by our first judicial review decision, which stated provisions in favor of women in this context by definition exclude those who are biologically male. It also said that incorporating transsexuals living as women into the definition of women impinges on the nature of the protected characteristics, which is a reserved matter, and out with the competence of the Scottish Government. The term transsexuals living as women encompasses those with the GRC, not just those without. The court's new GRC inclusive definition of woman cannot be used consistently throughout the Equality Act, and it was forced to revert to a biological understanding of pregnant woman to ensure females with the GRC, stating they are men, are able to access pregnancy and maternity rights. Parliament cannot be said to be both fully aware of the terms of the GRA when incorporating it into the Equality Act, yet unaware that it allows a person to obtain a GRC with their fertility intact. By overlooking the plain meaning, of the biological terms of sex and woman in the Equality Act to give precedence to the terms of an earlier statute, the court reverses the constitutional principles of interpretation. The later act should always take precedence in the event of a dispute or conflict in their terms. Under the Court of the GRC's inclusive definition of sex, single-sex services cannot be said to be successfully delivering a service for a particular sex if the gender reassignment exception in the Schedule 3 of the Equality Act is used to exclude trans people who hold a GRC in the relevant acquired gender, nor can they be said to be single-sex on a biological basis as those of the particular biological sex, but with a GRC will be excluded by the sex exemption clause. This leaves service providers confused and, regardless of decisions taken on provision, at risk of legal action for unlawful discrimination. The judges admitted confusion over the concept of heterosexual male with a GRC declaring himself a lesbian and the profound consequences for lesbians who now have no legal method of excluding such men from membership of their groups. Single-sex exceptions do not apply to associations. Our decisions to appeal. We had really hoped that the situation could have been resolved with a judicial review, but unfortunately it was not to be. The protected characteristic of women in the Equality Act still includes some males, and although the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, which allowed anyone to attain a GRC, had been paused for now, it may come back in some form. A future UK government may even lift the Section 35 order in which case sex categories lose all meaning in law. We spoke in detail with our legal team at Balfour plus Manson and our KC Aidan O'Neill and are satisfied that there were strong grounds to seek permission to appeal the Inner House decision to the UK Supreme Court. There is more than one way to achieve the same result, and in many ways, it would be preferable if the UK government took action to clarify the definition of sex in the Equality Act as a biological term. Kemi Badenoch, the Minister for Women and Equalities, recently stated that after receiving advice from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, she had been commissioned work on how this could be done and what the implications could be. We don't know what stage this work is at, and of course, there is need to be a public consultation before putting forward any amendments to the legislation to rectify the Inner House ruling. All this takes time and ideally cross-party consensuses, and may not be achievable when a general election is on a horizon. Doesn't mean that it shouldn't go ahead. Doesn't mean that it still shouldn't be looked into. As we were constrained by time limits for lodging an application to appeal, we did not want to give up a good opportunity to challenge the court's decision for only a possibility of future action by the government. So we decided to go ahead with a request to appeal to the UK Supreme Court. Permission for this appeal was granted by the Court of Session Inner House on the 16th of February 2024. So that was a few days ago. I'm just going to say this. Obviously, we have a right to appeal. People have a right to appeal. Now, the appeal wouldn't have been granted if this wasn't worth looking at. I'm just going to say that. All right. This is their grounds for their appeal. Our application seeking to leave to appeal was lodged with the Inner House on the 28th of November 2023 and contained the following 8 proposed grounds of appeal. The court's new analysis is contrary to and wholly irreconcilable with its decision in our first judicial review. The court misdirected itself in holding that the provisions of earlier statute took precedence over a later statute. The court failed to have a proper regard to the effect of its interpretation on the Equality Act 2010 as a whole. The court impermissibly rewrote the provisions of the Equality Act 2010 in order to reach its conclusion that the acquisition of the gender recognition certificate effects a sex change for the purposes of the Equality Act 2010. The court misdirected itself in law as to the effect of its conclusion on the protection of separate and single-sex spaces. The court misunderstood the effect of its conclusion on sexual orientation discrimination. The court misdirected itself in law as to the implication of its judgment on the provision of communal accommodation consistently with the requirements of the Equality Act 2010, and the court's decision undermines the criminal law and the protection of the vulnerable in sex by deception cases. In a very unusual move, the Scottish ministers accepted that these grounds give rise to an arguable point of law of general public importance regarding the need for certainty as to the definition of the term woman and ought to be heard by the UK Supreme Court. So there you go. Of course, I have linked that. I'm not going to offer an opinion on this anymore. But like I say, if you want some interesting reading, head on to the Discord server and see what's going on over there for other opinions on this. Like I said, it wouldn't be going to appeal if there wasn't a potential basis for the grounds for appeal, as far as I'm aware. I'm not a legal expert, just so you know. But discuss it, question it, break it down, think about everything that's just been read to you. I will also link the Equality Act and let me know what you think. I'd be interested to know what you think here. Please discuss politely, okay? Be nice to each other in the chat and chat about it, don't chat about it. Subscribe to my channel, share the video, and I will be back with another video tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.